Hello everyone, you're welcome back to my channel. Thank you for stopping right here on my space today. So in today's tutorial, I'll be sharing with you all the detailed process on how to sew a peplum blouse with a princess dart bustier, and also how to pad your princess dart, and also how to sew this standing cape sleeve. So this is the detailed process I shared with you all, and without much ado, I'll just get started with what we have today. So I'll be working with this African print fabric, which has a black background and this green as the designs on it, and yellow as well. I have my lining piece. I also have my wording for the padding of our princess dart. Okay, so I have my zipper, and the type of zipper that you should buy in the making of this blouse is actually a type of zipper that can open up entirely, just as you can see right here. So if you're actually looking for this particular shiny type, here in Nigeria I got mine for 1,000 naira. Okay, so you can actually make use of others if you don't see the exact type I use right here. So here are my rulers and my pen and also my scissors. So first things, I will get started now by drafting on my pattern paper. So from the top of my paper, I'm going to make a line right there of 3/4 of an inch, sorry, point. So I'll connect that 3/4 of an inch point into a straight line, and that is my shoulder line. So on that line, I'm going to divide my shoulder by 2, and right there I got 7.5 inches, and I added extra half inch just for sewing allowance, making it 8 inches. Then from that point, I came down by 8.5 inches as the armhole length. So normally I do mark 8 inches, but why I included half inch to this 8 inches is because the clients I'm making this dress for actually have lots of fat under her arm. Okay, so not only that she's busty, but she has too much fat under her arms, okay, so that it can accommodate properly. But the standard measurement for an armhole is usually 8 inches for an adult, unless your bust size is from 45 inches and above, right? So right there under my armhole line, I divided my armhole into 2 equal halves. I got the middle, which you can see I made a point right there, and on that point I came in by 1/2 an inch. So on my chest line, I divided the bust circumference of 40 inches by 4. I marked the quarter right there on my chest line, which is 10 inches. So on that line I labeled CL. It actually stands for chest line. Okay, so I connected this now from the shoulder all the way to the chest line. So for the neck width, I'm working with a neck width of 3 inches, and for the neck depth right here, I marked a neck depth of 7.5 inches, as you can see right there. So I'm actually creating a v-neck line for this particular blouse as requested by my clients. Okay, so now from that point on my neck width, I'll connect this way all the way into the 7.5 inches I came in by. So you can see I've made my curve, and the next is to create my shoulder slope, sorry, and from that point I went up by 1/2 an inch, and I'm slightly connecting into the other side of my shoulder, as you can see right here, and I made sure that all of this blended perfectly. So the next thing is to also place my ruler on, sorry, my tape on my shoulder, which I just labeled my shoulder line. I would have done that earlier. So I'm just simply going to get my bust point, which is the shoulder to the nipple, and for the one I'm working with right here is 11 inches, right? So I'll also go ahead and label that my BP, which simply means my bust point. I also place my tape on my shoulder line because that's my starting line, and I'm going to get the under bust. So the under bust I have right here is 16 inches, and the half length I have right here is 17.5 inches, right? So I'll also connect this into a straight line, just as you can see I'm doing right here. And after that, I'll also go on ahead and add 1/2 an inch, which is going to serve as the joining allowance to the flare part of this blouse, because we are actually going to fix or join a flare to the upper part of this blouse. Okay, so I went ahead to label all these lines, and the next is to divide my nipple to nipple point into 2. So the nipple to nipple point I'm working with right here is 8 inches, divided into 2 is 4 inches. So you can see that I went ahead to mark it to make points of 4 inches on my bust point line, on also on the half length line. After that, now I'll use a straight ruler and connect these points I made. So the next is to place my tape at that point. So towards the center front of this my pattern, I've marked 1/2 inch, and towards the sides I'm going to mark 1.5 inches. So I'm going to connect a line from that point to get up to my under bust, just on a straight line like this, as you can see. So I'll do it for the two sides, the center front and also the side front. So the next thing I'm going to do is come to my bust point on that line. I'll come down by 1/2 inch. I will make a point right there. So using my curve drill at this point, I'm going to place this properly to get this curve effect all the way from my bust point line at that point right there. From that 1/2 inch I came down by my bust point to my under bust line, just this way. So I created my curve for my side front, and I'll also repeat the same thing for my center front. So if you watch closely, you realize that the curve on the side front is actually pronounced, right? So that is how it's meant to be. So the next I'm going to come to that point on the half of my armhole length right there. I'll come down by 1/2 inch, as you can see right there. So I'm also going to get to my bust point line and go up at this point by 1/2 inch. So I'm going to connect this my dart line to get up to my chest line. Okay, so right here I'm going to create a curve from this 1/2 inch I came down by into this 1/2 inch. I also came up by on my bust point line. Okay, so you can see that I'm actually taking my time to place my ruler properly to make sure that the lines intersect properly in a curvy manner. So this is also how you should be very concerned, and also make sure that your line curves perfectly, right? So you can see I also came down by 1/2 inch again from that point, and I'm also going to make a connection like this using my curve rule into this other side. So right here I'm actually gradually achieving my princess dart. So you can see how I was taking my time to actually create all of this curve, right? So please also take your time to do that. So now on the line at the second armhole which I've created right there, I'm going to come out there by 1 inch, and I just extended that line this way. So I'm going to create an armhole now to get up to that point exactly where I had the quarter of my bust circumference, as you can see right there. Okay, so it shouldn't exceed that point. The next thing, now I divided my waist circumference by 4. I marked what I got right there. So I'm going to make a connection from my chest line all the way to the full length of this my half scale basic bodice, right? So I'll measure out what I have as the dart intake, which is 2 inches. I replaced it back right there, and you see how I went ahead to connect in this manner. So right here after the connection, I'll just go ahead and add 1.5 inches for sewing allowance. So normally I usually add 1/4 inch so that it can serve as the inch for my turning up, right? Because after you must have turned up all around, you're going to be taking like 1/2 inch at both sides. So right here I'm marking 1.5 inch and 1/4. Okay, so that is simply all I'm doing right here. And I also went ahead now to connect this way using my free hand, but feel free to also use your ruler. Okay, so after this, now I'm simply going to shade off this part that I'll be cutting out, or simply say on these red lines, right? So I will just go ahead and label my center front and also my side front before I proceed to cutting out all these pieces that I've already drafted. And please bear in mind that first thing to do right here is to draft the basic bodies. So you subtract the length of your blouse from your half scale basic bodies, and what you have left will be the length of your flare. So my full blouse length is 24 inches. So because I drafted the half scale basic bodies right here, the remaining inches I have left to complete 24 inches will be the length of my flare, right? So right here now I've gone ahead to cut out the sides. I can see I cut it straight, and the next is to cut on my neckline and also cut my shoulder parts. Okay, so the last thing now is to cut through on this dart. So firstly I'm going to start cutting from this other side, following this shape. As you can see, I'm gradually doing this, and I'm going to cut through at the top of that curve, that first curve which I made. You can see it right there, okay, right? And when I get to that point, I'm going to cut through from that armhole all the way up to that shoulder. So I hope it's not confusing at all, right? I believe so. And the next now is to cut out from the other dart. So following the exact shape as well, I'm also going to cut out following the curve. So please just actually take your time to achieve this, okay? So after cutting out that, now the next is cut out on my armhole, just as you can see right here. Okay, I hope it's very clear enough. So right here now, I'm done drafting for the front part of our blouse, and you can see what it looks like. So the next thing I'm simply going to do is to get another pattern paper or the remnant of my pattern paper and draft out the back bodies. So right here, I've gone ahead to go get another pattern, and I started marking 1 inch from the edge of my pattern paper. All these dots are connected into a straight line, as you can see right here. And from the top of my paper, I'm going to be marking 3/4 of an inch so that I can be able to roll out my shoulder line. Okay, so I'll just label that part zipper allowance, right, so that I know that it is my zipper allowance and also my shoulder line. So right here now, all the measurements I'm going to be inserting right here will be starting from that line and not from the edge of my paper. So I simply went ahead to mark my shoulder divided by 2 on my shoulder line, and from that point I came down by 8.5 inches, which is also my armhole length. So I'm going to repeat everything I did for the front part of my basic bodice pattern, and the only difference will be my neck depth, because right here I'm working with a neck depth of 4 inches and also a zipper allowance, right? I'll be fixing a zipper to the back and not to the front, okay? And also the way to connect your dart for your back bodies, right? So that is the only difference with the front and for the back as well. So I've gone ahead now to do all of this, but I'm also going to explain to you all how I went about this. So I also came down by 1/2 an inch from the half of my armhole, as you can see right there, and also I marked my nipple to nipple points, and which I got right there, and on both sides of my nipple points I marked 1/2 an inch, and I slightly connected this way into my bust point line. So it's not hard, it's not difficult at all to achieve, okay? Now from the base of this my pattern, as you can see right there, I marked half of an inch here. So I'm going to mark 5.5 inches upward. So I'm trying to create a zipper slope right here at this point to avoid bulginess at the back of our zipper. So I'll extend this line just for a guide, let's just say just for a guide. So I'm going to connect slightly this way, and the next thing I'm going to do is to replace my dart intake, and that is just simply it, and also add my stitching on my sewing allowance. And by the time I do all of this, I am done. Please don't also forget to add your 1/4 of an inch for your turning up allowance, because if you're adding a lining, it's very necessary, because if you are to turn up with that 1/4 of an inch from your actual measurement, most times I've done that, the dress actually comes out a bit tighter, right? So you cannot stitch in back with the allowance taken. So if I don't put 1/4 of an inch while I'm adding my stitching allowance, I usually end up stitching the sides of my top using 3/4 of an inch, okay? So it will not be up to the actual allowance which I left. I hope this is not confusing at all. So what I'm simply trying to say right here is that it's very important and necessary you add a quarter of an inch, which is going to serve as your turning up allowance. So I went ahead to also cut out the same way I did for the front part, and this is what I have for the back part of my blouse. Okay, so this is my back piece, and right here is my front piece. So I'll go ahead now and cut out on my fabric. Okay, so I'll also cut out on my lining piece and also an stay that I'll be ironing to my fabric. Okay, so to cut out your fabric, you actually need to spread out your fabric and fold into two, just as I said I did right here. So I'm going to cut out for the side front, right? So I did this by placing my side front on this folded part of my fabric, making sure that it accommodates properly, and I have about half-inch space at the front side so that I can actually add my ease right all around on my stitching allowance, or sorry, on my joining allowance, right? So I went ahead to pin this in order to avoid it from shifting from the actual fabric. So I'm going to start by marking half of an inch from the base of this my pattern all the way to the upper part. So following the shape on this front part, that is how I'm going to continue marking half of an inch all around. So when you get to your under bust line, please do ensure that you get the curve perfectly. Okay, so it should be very necessary that you get the curve properly, especially on your under bust part, and also taking note of your under bust by notching it as well. So just watch carefully what I'm doing right here, and I believe that everything I did right here is very understanding. So you also follow that shape and cut out after marking your half of an inch all around, and you see that I stop exactly on that upper part. So also notch your under bust line, just like I said. You can use your chalk to highlight it or extend the line to your fabric, and you go ahead and notch. Okay, just as I've done right here. So I'm going to cut out for the other part of my pattern, right, as you can see right here. So you can see the places where I added all my stitching on my joining allowance. It's actually my joining allowance actually. So for the center back, you can see the part where I added my joining allowance, and for the side back you can see the part. For my center front, you can see I only added this joining allowance to the side, and for the side front you can see I also did that. So I didn't add to the side, I didn't add to the center front at the front, and that is just it. So I also cut out my lining piece and also my stay. So the next thing now is to cut out for my flare. So please, you need to pay proper attention at this point. So firstly, we are going to have our fabric folded into two, just like the normal way we fold our fabric, okay, when you are about to cut out for your basic bodies or any dress you want to make. Okay, so the length of the flare I am supposed to mark right here is 7 inches, right? So plus other stitching allowance, so I would like to have the twice of the length of my flare, which I measured out and I had it. And from the top of this fabric I folded downward. So you fold in from the side, and from the second step is to fold from the upper part all the way down. So you can see I went ahead measuring this to ensure that this is up to at least 16 inches, since I'm going to actually mark 8 inches as the length of my flare right here. Okay, so as I've done this right here, now you realize that I have the upper part entirely closed. There is no space, or there is no joints, there is entirely closed. Okay, so right here I folded into 4. So I have 4 pieces right here, and I measured out and I had even more than 16 inches as the length. So I was satisfied with that, of course. And the next thing I'm going to do now is to fold this in a triangular or in a cone shape manner. Okay, and just know that all of these folds are actually going to one side, which is this part that is open, as you can see right here. Okay, so I'm going to place my hand at that top part and hold it right there, and from the top part I'm going to fold in a triangular manner or shape this way. So I hope everything I did right here is very clear enough. So you can see how I folded for the last time. So right here now I folded 6 times, so I actually have 6 pieces right here. But don't worry, we're actually going to be doing everything together. So I'll make sure I arrange this properly, like just take your time and arrange this properly, and I'll flip it to the other side so that I can actually see the other shorter side of my flay, okay, so that I don't make any mistakes at all. All right, so I flipped it now to the other shorter parts, and if you watch closely, like I said, I have this other side entirely closed and this part is open. So the next thing I'm going to do now is to divide my waist circumference. So the waist circumference I have right here is 37 inches, which I've written down right here. So for me to divide, I have to count how many folds I have on this my fabric, okay. So we are going to do this together. So from the underneath, we are going to start counting one, single. So I counted 1, 2, so this other one is 3, 4, 5, 6. So meaning that we have 6 folds right here. So I'm going to count this separately, each, not together, okay. So I have 6 folds right here after counting, just as you saw right here. So simply meaning that I'm going to divide my waist circumference by 6. So I don't like using my calculator while I'm cutting out my waist circumference for my flare, because most of the time you actually have extra, have extra on your waist and to be excess. So it's not advisable for your flare to be very big on the waist. It's preferable that it is actually small, so that later you can go on and manipulate that, right? So I divided with my tape into 4, so I got about 9.5 inches or thereabout, and I also went ahead to divide that 9.5 inches into 2. So you can see that right there I had 4.5 inches. I'm sorry, 4.25. Okay, so that is normally how I do this, and after this I just add extra 1/4 inch for my zipper allowance. Like I said, it's preferable that your waist is smaller, so that at the end of the day, if it doesn't fit to your basic bodies or the waist of your blouse, you can actually go ahead and manipulate it, which I'll also be sharing with you right here, because I also encountered the same thing, okay. So right here now I placed my tape from that top part of my fabric at that pointy part, and I started by marking 4.5 inches. So remember that I got 4.25, so I told you I'll be adding extra 1/4 inch just for my zipper allowance. Even if it doesn't get up to my waist circumference of my blouse, I'll just manipulate it, which will still be doing together in this tutorial, okay. So you can see that I got my waist already, and I connected in a circular manner just like that. So now for the length of my flare, so this part now is the length of my flare, okay. So remember I told you I'll be marking 7 inches. So 1/2 inch is going to be for the joining part to the blouse of to the upper part of my blouse, sorry. So I extra 1/2 inch for the hemming, or you can simply go ahead and add 1 inch, okay. So altogether right now I'm marking 8.5 inches, right? So that is simply it. I'm going to hem using 1 inch and 1/2 inch for joining to the upper part of my blouse, okay. So also you see the way I place my tape, and I'm marking this in a circular manner, and that is actually how you should also do yours, okay. So just take your time and do this, all right. So after that, now I'll simply start by cutting out the waist part or the waist area, which I have right there. So if you want to know that you actually got a perfect circle, by the time you cut off that waist part, this piece I'm holding right here should be circle, okay. So that is how to know before you even go ahead to cut out this other side, that you got your flare pattern very well. So the next thing I'm going to cut out is on my lining piece. So this my lining piece, I'll also fold the same way I did for my fabric, okay. So after folding, I'm simply going to place my already cut out flare on it, as you can see right here. So making sure that the parts where I have my openings aligned, and this other part that is closed also aligns. So if you watch properly, I believe you understand what I'm doing right here, okay. So after cutting this out, now I'm going to actually reduce this my lining piece by 1/2 inch, because I don't want it of the same length with my fabric. I want my fabric to be a bit inside towards the lining part. So after doing this, now I've go ahead now to open this up like this. So I actually love making a very standing flare, to be honest with you, but my clients didn't want it. So normally what I do is I iron a peplum stay to my fabric to make my flare standing. So in case that's what you want to do, feel free, go ahead and do that. Okay, so right here now I just went ahead to measure what I had on my waist circumference, but that doesn't really count. It's actually when I'm fixing this to my fabric, because you know that this has a curvy shape, so you can't actually get the exact measurement for that. Okay, so I kept that aside now to actually cut out my padding for my princess dart. Okay, so firstly you have to fold your wadding into two. So I'll cut out for my front piece first. So I'll arrange this and make sure it starts from the edge of this my folded wadding piece. So now I'm going to come to exactly where my neck depth stops, right there, and I'm going to come down by 1 inch. So I'll extend that 1 inch to get up to my wadding piece using this my ruler. Okay, so it's going to be my guide. So remember, the reason I asked you to all to notch your under bust, so that notch is just my guide right now for me to know where my under bust is without even using my pattern paper. So from my under bust I have to fold this in like this, and I'm simply going to cut out now from my under bust following the shape of the side of this my center front. So as you can see right here now, when I get up to that point I stopped and I used my ruler to extend this line to the other side, and this is what I have. So why I'm going to iron this, I'll make sure that I place it exactly on my under bust on that notched part. Okay, so now for the side front, all I did is to place this my side front on my wadding piece and also trace out or mark out the under bust area. So I did this and my camera stopped filming, but you're just simply going to follow that shape in front and stop exactly on your under bust right there. And after that now you're going to get your tape and you're going to mark about 5 inches, sorry. Okay, so you can see I raised my fabric and made that 5 inches mark right there. And after that now I'm just simply going to remove this my fabric and I'm going to follow from that my under bust point, and I'm going to cut this and also follow that 5 inches where I cut out. Can see what I have right here. So that is it for cutting out your padding for your princess dart bustier. So I believe you found this easy. Okay, so please do try it out as well. So while placing your wadding, please you place it on the wrong side of your fabric, and also you have the shiny part on your wadding piece, also iron it to your fabric that is on the wrong side, making sure that the wadding piece you're ironing sits exactly on your under bust on the part you notched. Okay, so you can see that I'm taking my time to actually align and also arrange this, making sure that all the parts aligns properly, because after this the next thing I'll do is to iron this my wadding piece to this my fabric. Okay, so but firstly I have to iron my stay to my fabric, then I'll now iron my wadding. So right here now I went ahead now to do exactly what I just said. You can see I have ironed my stay at the wrong side of my fabric and also iron my wadding piece. So I flipped all of this to the right side, so this is actually how it's going to be. Okay, so now I'm going to place the right side of my side front to the right side of my center front. So I'm going to make sure that they properly align on the base, you can see, and from that point I'm going to start pinning. So as you are pinning, just know that this is going to be like, you're going to be noticing that it will have this toughness because of the curve. It's not like tough, like it's not going to be straight, so you are going to follow that curvy shape as you are pinning. That is why it's very important to pin first. You encounter that it's not straight, it's going to be curved, so follow that pattern because that is actually what is going to give it that room for your boobs to sit properly. Okay, so just continue covering it that way and pin. So after pinning, I'm simply going to go ahead now to mark half of an inch, following the exact shape of the way it is to the upper part. Okay, so it's very very important and essential you do this. Okay, please don't forget. So follow the shape and trace mark half of an inch all the way to the upper part. So most of the times after actually joining all of this, you notice you have excesses on that part, but I'll be talking about the letter actually. But for now, I'll just mark this half of an inch, which after marking, I'll follow that shape now and stitch. So I'll also do the same thing for the other part of my side front. Okay, just the same pattern, that is what I'm going to follow. Okay, so for the back part of my blouse right here now, I actually have this in separate pieces. I didn't iron an estate to it. You can go ahead and also iron your estate to yours if you have yours still remaining. Okay, so I'm also going to place them right sides this way and also pin the same way I pin for the front part and stitch. So after stitching, guys, this is what I had, and you can see that it is already looking beautiful. So you can see that our core part is standing and exactly on that bust point area, sorry, on the under bust. And right here now, like I said earlier, you're going to have excesses most times on the armhole area, so you're just going to mark your chalk and trace it out this way and cut off these excesses because it's not needed at all. Right, so I've gone ahead to do all of that now, and the next thing for me to do is to iron all my seam open. It's not meant to be closed, it's meant to be ironed open. So using this my self-made tailor's ham, I went ahead to place this my blouse on it, and I'm going to be opening on my seam and also iron. So I'll also do it for the back part and also the front part. So this is it. After opening my seam and ironing, this is what I have. Most times people even go ahead to stitch on the seam they iron open. That is what gives it this kind of design in front. Okay, so everything I did for my fabric, I also did it for my lining piece, as you can see right here, but I didn't pad my lining piece, neither did I iron my estate to it. Right, so I mean on the joins, I join everything the same way, and like I said, I also have these excesses on the armhole area which I'll later go on ahead to trim off. Okay, so I went ahead to arrange it firstly on the neckline area to make sure that it aligns properly, and I'll simply go ahead and stitch all around on this part using just quarter of an inch except the base. So I'll also repeat the same thing for the back part of my blouse right here. So I also place my lining piece on this way, and I'll go ahead and stitch all around except the base. I'm not going to stitch up the base of my blouse. All right, so just follow the shape exactly. If you know how the shape went, just follow the exact shape. Right, so I've gone ahead to do all of that, and I'm just cutting off the excesses on the armhole on my lining piece. It's a normal thing for you to encounter. It's nothing you should be worried about at all, trust me. Okay, so this is what I have, and for my front part, this is what I have, and you can see it's sitting perfectly. So I'm going to turn this out to the right side after trimming the lining excesses I had, and when I turn it to the right side, I'm just going to simply join on the shoulder area. Flip to the right side first, so you now join your shoulder area, that is the front part of your blouse on the shoulder. You join it to the back part, right sides facing each other, right sides facing each other, please. Okay, so now on the neckline, I didn't top stitch on my lining piece actually, because I'll later on go ahead to use my hemming gum to hem my neck piece. Okay, so I'll just do that. I didn't actually go ahead to top stitch on my lining piece. Okay, so when you use your hemming gum, it's going to sit flat on your neckline. Okay, so like I said, go ahead now to stitch or join this on the shoulder area. So I've gone ahead to do that. As you can see, I didn't join the zipper part, just the shoulder part, and you can see what I have right here. So the next thing I'm going to do now is actually to get my sleeve and also mark out my sleeve right here. So you can see I separated this way, and from my shoulder, the joints I have on my shoulder, I'm going to mark up to the point where I want my sleeve to stop, which is that 10 inches you see right there. Right, so from my shoulder now is going to be 10 inches, and that 10 inches is like before the bust point. So it's all dependent on where you want your sleeve to stop. Okay, so actually stop on your half length. It's all about choice. So from the base, you see that I folded this upward. Okay, I folded this upward, and from the side now I'm going to fold this inward. So but I have to measure out the length of my sleeve to make sure that it's actually okay, and I folded from the side. So okay, so you can see what I did right here. I folded from the base, and after folding from the base upward, I folded from the side. So right here now I'm simply going to start by marking 1.5 inches inwardly this way from the edge of my fabric. So the next thing I'll mark is actually that point, okay, from my shoulder to that my that's sorry, for the shoulder to the part I measured where my sleeve will be stopping. Okay, so I'm just simply going to connect these two this way. You can see, so you are now going to determine the length of your sleeve. Okay, how long you want your sleeve to be. So for me, I marked 7.5 inches. All right, so that was what my client wanted, because I'm also going to stitch this using 1/4 inch at both sides. So by the time I do this, I'll be left with 7 inches. Okay, so I connected this way. I hope it's not confusing at all. 1.5 inches from the edge, from the base to the upper part 10 inches, then from the side to the other side 7.5 inches. So you're just going to cut out exactly the same way that you already marked all these chalks, right? So I'm going to be having 4 pieces of this, because I'm going to be using the same fabric as the lining piece. So if you want yours to be standing very well, iron your hair stay and also your peplum stay or your hat stay, anything at all. Okay, so my client doesn't want all of that, so I just ironed a stay for her. All right, but if you want yours if I was actually making this for myself, that is what I would have done. So place this right size facing each other and join all the sides, leave about 1 inch space, and you are going to bring it out from there and stitch it down later. All right, so I went ahead to do all of that right now. So the next thing is to fix my zipper. So you can actually decide how you want this to sit at the top of your shoulder. Okay, but for me, I just came in by 1/2 inch from that point on my armhole area, and I folded this my sleeve into 2. I notched the middle point, okay, and I'm going to pin this exactly on that mark I made, that 1/2 inch I came in by from my armhole area. So this is just something that you really need to be diligent about. So even if you want to come in by 2 inches on your shoulder, you are still free to do that. Okay, so you can see that after everything, I ended up having my sleeve exactly on that chalk mark I made. So that is all about this, right? So after pinning this, now go ahead and just stitch using 1/4 inch. So this is what I did for the 2 sides, and the next thing now is to join the sides of my blouse. So I'm going to join at this point using 1.5 inches. No need of reducing the actual stitching allowance I left, because I already added 1/4 inch when I was adding my stitching allowance, because it served as my turning up allowance. You understand what I mean when you're actually doing this yourself. Okay, so after marking this, I'm going to join the both sides, and after joining, this is what I had. Okay, so our blouse is really coming out very beautiful. So for the flare part, I only went ahead to join the base and also the side, as you can see right here, right sides facing each other. So I'm going to turn it now to the right side, because that was the wrong side we had. Okay, So here it is, and after flipping this, I'm going to join the lining to my fabric, like I'm going to stitch on top, okay, so that it will relax properly, so by the time I'm fixing and also ironing, I don't have any difficulties. Okay, so all around like this. So I've gone ahead now to do that. And for my blouse, I went ahead to notch the middle parts. Okay, so for my flay, I also do the same thing. I'm going to notch the middle parts, okay, so that the middle parts can actually face each other, and I'll start pinning from there. So I make sure that the two aligned properly, as you can see right there. So I'm going to start pinning. So I'm going to arrange this. I'll make sure that I bring this out very well and pin it. Okay, so while I was doing this, by the time I got to the edge of my waist area of my blouse, I realized that my flare didn't get up to that point. So at this point, this other part actually got up to the other side. So all I'm going to do right here now is to unpin this. I'll fold this my flare into two this way, and all I'm going to do now is that I'm going to cut off about quarter of an inch from this waist area. So I'm cutting off quarter of an inch because the spaces I had for my flare to correspond on the waist to my blouse wasn't much. But if it was much, I would have proceeded with about half of an inch or 1 inch. But please remember and do know that as you are doing this, the waist is actually increasing, so you don't cut out so much or excesses. Okay, so I went ahead to do that, and I went ahead now to pin, and it corresponded. So I'm just showing right here it corresponded. I didn't want to take a whole lot of time, that was why I didn't film, but I repeated the process I would have done initially. Okay, so stitch up using half of an inch, as you can see I've done right here, and this is what it looks like, right? So you can see this neatness inside. This is like a total turn up. Okay, so I cut out this my lining piece I'm using to pipe this rough part we have on the joints, right? So it's 1 inch wide and it's very long. I didn't really measure out the length. So you're going to place it this way and make your first stitch on this half of an inch joint we have right here, and you're going to flip it again twice and pipe. Okay, so if you know how to pipe, you really understand what I mean. So as you're piping, please, you don't stitch on top of your flare or your blouse, so it's just on that half of an inch allowance. Okay, so you can see what I have right here after doing all of that. So it came out looking very nice, and I'm super happy. So the next is actually to fix your zipper to your blouse. So for the zipper, you're going to start fixing from the base. So remember that we actually removed half of an inch from the base of our zipper, so that is why you have to place this from the beginning part, because this zipper, this part where we have this material like on this zipper is half of an inch. So for the upper part, you just mark 1 inch. All right, so place your zipper right side facing your fabric. If you are placing this, it's not going to be straight, and that is actually the main goal. All right, so just follow, or you can just mark 1 inch at that top part, but when you get to you're going to mark half of an inch and place your zipper, and just watch properly all I'm doing right here. You realize that what I'm saying right here is actually what I'm also doing. Okay, so that was all I did. Join your zipper properly and also finish it up. So this is everything. That's the only thing you need to do for this blouse, and we are done making this blouse. Thank you all so much for watching. Please don't forget to subscribe. See you next time. Bye.